Hi everyone, I am Rachel Colton of R&C, and today I'm going to be showing you a chalk painting technique called dry brushing. So for this video, what I'm going to use are these candlesticks that I found at a thrift store, and we're going to be using Sloan's chalk paint in Old White, Coco, and French linen. So let's get started. For this project, I'm going to be using Sloan chalk paint, and you can buy this from a stockist in either a quart size or you can buy a 4-ounce sample size. If you're going to be doing a lot of projects, I find that the quart makes more sense financially in terms of the cost. I happen to have some Old White left over from another project. I store my leftover paint in these sorbet containers with lids so that I don't get rust. So the first thing we're going to do for this technique is we're just going to paint the whole candlestick in our base color. And for my base color, I am using Old White. So I'm just going to get a little bit of that on my brush. And I think I'll start at the top. This one lost its little candle dish, but that's okay. It'll give us some extra character. So you just want to rub this into all the little nooks and crannies to get a good base coat. So after allowing your piece to dry for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how thick you painted your first coat, you can decide if you like the amount of coverage you've gotten from your first coat. You'll probably see some of the wood through it, or you can decide if you're going to do a second coat. I prefer to have full coverage on my base coat, so I'm going to do a second coat of my base color, which is Old White. Alright, so my candlestick now has 2 coats of Old White all around, and it looks great right now, but I want to bring out some of this detail, so we're going to do the dry brushing technique. So the next color I'm going to use is Coco. I haven't used it in a little while, so I'm going to give it a good shake. And then if I were doing a large scale project, I would continue to work with a normal sized paintbrush. But since I'm doing something on such a small scale, I'm going to switch over to a smaller paintbrush. So I'm just going to use something like this, an artist's brush. I actually have enough paint in the lid that I'm going to use that. Okay, so to do our dry brushing technique, what you want to do is you want to put a little bit of paint on your brush, and then you're going to dab most of it off of your brush. So I have this paper protecting my surface, so I'm just going to wipe off most of my paint so that there's only a little bit left. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly feather, holding my brush really lightly. I'm just going to feather this on. And it's just using that little tiny bit of paint that's on the brush. And what that will do is it will pick up the parts of your piece that stick out more. So I'm going to try to zoom in. It's a little bit hard to see on camera, but it'll show better when I'm finished. So when I need more paint, I can use that little puddle I've created while that's still wet, and then keep going around my piece. And right right now I'm using the Coco for the first layer of dry brushing, and I'm actually going to go back and do a second layer of dry brushing on top of this using French linen, which is a little bit lighter than the Coco, a little bit more gray, and that'll just give us even more depth. So I'm going to finish doing the whole thing, the Coco, and then I'll come back, show you what it looks like, and we'll do the French linen. Okay, so I've done my first layer of dry brushing, and you can see it just starts to bring out the details in the piece, gives it a little bit more dimension and a little bit of color. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a layer of dry brushing with French linen on top of the Coco. I could just leave it with the Coco, but I'm going to do an additional layer. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to take a little bit of paint on my brush. The amount that's in the lid is just fine. And I'm going to wipe most of it off so that my brush is dry. And then I'm going to hold my brush very lightly and just feather it over that. And again, it brings out the raised areas of your piece. So it brings out all the character and the details. It's an alternative to distressing, and it almost gives it sort of a wood grain look. So I'm just going to keep going, finish the whole candlestick, and I will show you the finished product. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to seal my piece with some clear wax to protect the finish. Okay, so I have finished with the French linen on top of the Coco. So here is our finished product. And you can see how the dry brushing brings out all the detail and the character in your piece, and almost gives it sort of a wood grain effect. And you can see the before and after side by side. So we've gone from a $4 set of thrift store candles to something that you might find for $30 a piece or more in a boutique. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to seal this with some clear wax to protect the finish. Normally I would use some kind of brush to apply my wax, but I find that it can sometimes take the paint off around the edges. So instead I'm going to take my clear wax, and I'm just going to use a rag to apply it because that'll be a little bit gentler on the paint and the finish. So what you want to do is just reach in there, grab a clump of wax, and you're just going to rub it onto the piece. You kind of want to work it into the paint, and then any excess is going to get wiped off. So don't worry if there's some clumps, just really work that in. So I'm going to work this in, and then I'll show you how to wipe it off. So once you've rubbed your wax in, you just want to give it a few minutes to dry, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then what you're going to do is go back with another rag, and you're just going to wipe it so that you get any excess clumps off of it that may have gotten into the detailed parts. So you're just wiping off the excess. And after you wax, you want to just be gentle with your piece for 24 hours or longer, just to give it some time to cure. And then once that wax hardens, it's going to protect your paint finish. And then you can enjoy your new piece. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Here's my new candlesticks, $4 to fabulous. I hope you'll give this technique, dry brushing, a try. You can use it on a variety of items and it brings out the character in your piece. Thank you and subscribe.